All right. So today we are going to be celebrating 100 years of sight and service with the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. We have a special guest with us. This is Dan Norris. Dan is the incoming executive director at the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. He's been with the agency since 2004, serving in a variety of professional capacities as first a teacher of the visually impaired, a certified orientation and mobility specialist, and certified vision rehabilitation therapist. He's also been the vision rehabilitation therapy program coordinator at University of Massachusetts, Boston, from 2014 to 2026. And even more important than all of those things, Dan is someone who I am very grateful to call a friend, a colleague, and a fellow Vermonter who is living, working, and thriving with vision loss. So, Dan, would you like to offer any additional introduction for yourself? And thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much, Heather, and that's a wonderful introduction. I don't think there's anything more to add. I've got a cat named Willow and three kids, and I've loved living here in Vermont for the past 22 years. So yeah, that's me in a
Awesome.
nutshell.
All right. Um, yeah, and so you're here with us today on behalf of Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, which
Yes.
is our statewide service agency, who, as you may have guessed from the webinar title, has been providing services to blind and visually impaired Vermonters for 100 years this year in 2026. Do you want to tell us, Dan, first, maybe just a little bit about what VAB is and what they do, and then maybe we can talk through a few highlights over the historical timeline just to help folks understand a little bit more about the agency.
Absolutely. So VABVI is how we kind of refer to it in shorthand. It's a nonprofit vision rehabilitation services agency. It's the only nonprofit agency like itself here in Vermont. Provides the direct vision rehabilitation services to Vermonters of all ages. We work from birth through end of life. We've got clients that are a few weeks old and clients who are over 100 years old that we've worked with. And so no matter what age or stage of life that you might be in, if you have a visual impairment and it's impacting your ability to do tasks of daily living, to be able to uh, successfully be employed, to be able to live independently at home, access your education. We have teachers that can address those needs. We also have a volunteer driver program that can help clients to get around the state with weekly grocery trips, with trips to the doctor if they don't have Medicaid, paying for their services for travel. And also, even with your personal trips, we can provide 12 personal trips with anywhere within the state of Vermont each year to our clients because transportation, as you know, is a major barrier for a lot of us that are visually impaired. So
Yeah,
that's that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
With Heather here, I always like to say Vermont is a bit of a public transit desert.
Yes.
But with that one caveat, otherwise, Vermont is a pretty great place to be blind. We have amazing services and supports here. Dan,
Absolutely.
it might be obvious to you and I, but I'm wondering if you could maybe help people in our audience understand a little bit like what is vision rehabilitation therapy? Why do people who are blind need these types of services to be able to live
Uh,
at home independently or work successfully?
That's a great question. I'll take it by age if that's okay.
Sure.
Um, so if you're talking about a child who is either born with a visual impairment or develops a visual impairment shortly after birth, I've neglected to mention myself am legally blind. I have a juvenile form of macular degeneration called Stargardt's, and so my visual impairment developed when I was 7 years old. But if a child was born with a visual impairment, they can develop delays. There can be motorical delays, there can be social delays, there can be cognitive delays due to vision loss because the typical things that stimulate a person as they grow up are not there because of asensory loss. An example I like to share is If you have a child who is, uh, laying on the ground playing, and they, in the kitchen, their pots and pans are banging, right? That noise might attract the attention of a child that has typical sight, and they see the flashy, bright pans, flashing in the under the cupboards, and they think, oh, that's really cool. And that motivates them to want to move their body to crawl to that kitchen to get in the cupboard and to bang the pots and pans. But if you are visually impaired, you hear the noise, but unless you're shown that these things make a lot of noise and they're banged together, that it's just a noise. And so that stimulus to want to go there isn't there, and so you end up with motorical delays where the body doesn't develop its muscles typically. Because there's that little delay there. Well, our orientation mobility specialists, we get in there and we let the kid, we help the kid know that they can move their body to get to things they want to get to by having things, deliberately encounter them tactually, and then move a little out of arm's reach, and then help them to move their body to get further and further, and that then mitigates the delays that might happen motorically because of a sensory loss of vision. Socially, if you don't see people smiling at you, to smile back is something that is a delayed social behavior. And so that's something that we help to teach children, social skills to be able to interact with a sighted world. These are things that you don't think a lot about unless you have, someone in your life that has experienced it. As we move forward in your education, if you don't have access to print, you're not going to be able to keep up with your peers. So vision rehabilitation services will help to identify your sensory learning channels. Maybe it's going to be large print, maybe it's going to be Braille, maybe it's going to be a combination of large print, Braille, and audio materials. Our teachers can help you to identify what's going to help you access your education and be competitive with your peers. That's what happened for me. I was taught how to type on a typewriter when I was in third grade, which is kind of crazy to say. I learned how to type on a typewriter. But by fourth grade, they had me on a computer, and an Apple IIe computer in school, and I was learning how to type, touch type, and learning how to make things bigger on the screen. So I grew up with technology evolving from the 1980s, forward. And that really played a role in helping me to be competitive with my peers and to be able to be competitive in college and be competitive in the workplace. And that's kind of how services, go into adult life. We have services that can work with the folks in the state of Vermont who are the case managers for vocational rehabilitation programs, but they contract us to provide the direct vision rehabilitation services to help people adapt some of their materials for work, to learn the orientation and mobility of their home, their community, the bus routes to get to work, to access their services. And then later in life, we help people to remain in their homes. A lot of people think that once they have a visual impairment, they can't cook anymore. Well, there are completely blind chefs that are out there that are, Michelin star chefs. There's just a different way of doing it that helps you to know when the food is done, and and when things have boiled, and when things are ready to be, pulled out of the oven, and making sure you're protected when you do that and not burning yourself. There's lots of ways you can do that. And we can help you to adapt your living situation so you can cook and clean and live independent. And one of the major things we do now is we also teach people, especially seniors, how to use things like their smartphone to be able to access the world and utilize that universal design that we'll be talking about later that's built into a lot of things that really has leveled the playing ground for a lot of people who are blind and visually impaired. That's a long answer for you there. Sorry.
That is a really thorough answer, and it made so much sense. And I think it would be critical for anyone sort of outside of our little bubble in low
Yeah,
vision land here. So I think that was super. You alluded to, well, I want to, two things. Let's
okay,
pause and talk about the history of the organization just a little bit, since
sure.
we really are celebrating a legacy, incredible legacy of service here. And why don't we hear a little bit about that from you? And then I'll
Sure.
just share a little bit of my personal story with the organization, and then we can move on to, I did want to touch on that kind of special relationship we have here with DBVI. So,
Excellent. Yes.
yeah.
So it was 100 years ago that we had a visit in Vermont from Helen Keller. She came to our state, met with a lot of officials, and really energized the community and challenged the community to think of ways that they could help to uh, to increase the independence of people who are blind and visually impaired in the state. And there was a group of business people in the I think it was actually in the St. Albans area that got together and they founded the Vermont Association for the Blind. That was the name of the agency back then. And in the beginning, they were their mission was very similar in the beginning to, say, like the Lions Club and some other organizations that are out there. They help to connect people with glasses and getting to see an optometrist and getting, lenses to help people see. But then they expanded their view and they started to lean into vision rehabilitation services. And it was a very new field back then. And they went ahead and they hired a person. Her name was Ann Connolly. And she was the first, what we would refer to today as a vision rehabilitation therapist. Back then, they called them home teachers. And they would meet with people in their home. And she herself was blind. And she really, kind of set the model for what in the future became the services we provided. She was the first to get a white cane in the state of Vermont. She was the first to get a guide dog in the state of Vermont. And it's really kind of neat to go back and read the newspaper articles because there was a lot she was doing and people were noticing it and it was in the papers and that really kind of set the partnership back then because it was the following year in 1927 that the State Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired was organized. And the two organizations from there forward really worked together with the state of Vermont handling vocational rehabilitation and contracting the Vermont Association for the Blind to provide those vision rehabilitation services. And then as we move forward into the 60s and 70s, we expanded the number of people who were providing those services. In the 80s, we added in children's services. Stephanie Bissonette and Kathy Lawrence were the first two teachers of the visually impaired that were hired in the state to provide services in the school system to kids that were blind and visually impaired. And Stephanie is actually still with us. She's the director of children's services right now, and she's getting close to retirement, but she's still, doing the great work out there every day. And we've expanded over the years so that we now have four offices: one in South Burlington, one in Rutland, one in Brattleboro, and one in Berlin. And from those offices, our teachers go out and provide services across the entire state.
Thank you so much. That the history is just fascinating, and it feels good to be, in a state where there's been a commitment to improving independence and quality of life for people who are blind and visually impaired for as long as we have here in Vermont. I will just briefly share is Kathy Lawrence was my TVI, my teacher of the visually impaired, when I was in school. So I definitely recognize that name. And just sort of the long and short of my relationship with VAB has been they've been a solid, steady, supportive presence in my life for the past century. And whether it's been meeting my family when I was home as a newborn with congenital visual impairment, or whether it was being my TBI, who was supporting my getting access to large print books when I was in school and alternative note taking, and how was I going to follow things that were written on the good old fashioned blackboard and all of those things through orientation and mobility when it was time for college and learning how to use public transit and maybe starting a new job. I need to learn some new mobility routes and whatnot. They've just been by my side, and I attribute a lot of my personal success professionally and personally to sort of knowing that VAB is always a phone call away. So
And
yeah,
Heather,
that's
you're probably not going to toot your own horn, but Heather has also contributed to our agency now as a board member, and you've been on the board before, and you've returned to our board of directors to help us now too, and you've been a very integral part of the board of our directors. So thank you.
thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I can't believe I'm closing in on the end of my first 3-year term here, this for my second time around.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so we could reminisce all day, but let's go ahead for our audience sake and move on to, could you just speak briefly? You did touch on the relationship that we have with our federally funded vocational rehabilitation services specific for folks who are blind and visually impaired here in Vermont. Could you just tell folks a little
Yeah.
bit about how that works here and sort of the benefits to the community for that having that relationship with VAB?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, there are two organizations here in Vermont. There's the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, that's us. And then there's the State Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and that's a state voc rehab agency that also provides independent living services for people that are not on a vocational track. They have the case managers, and we have the teachers and therapists that provide services to people. And so the benefit is that they're able to focus on creating the plans and managing the funds, and then they're able to contract that out to us, and we can, as a nonprofit, hire the teachers that provide those direct services. The federal funds that are attributed to our state for the older blind program, those were created in the 1990s. And the idea is that if we can help people to age in place, it's less expensive for the federal government and for the state to have people age in their homes than it is to, say, pay for 24-hour service in a nursing home or a senior center living situation, residential living situation. It's much, much more expensive because they need to staff the professionals and nurses and so forth that are around clock watching people. It's actually 15 times more expensive for someone to be in a residential living situation with nursing and so forth than it is for someone to be able to live in their home independently. And also, psychologically and socially, people that are living in their homes and communities are more connected with the people in their community and events and things like that. And they end up being more isolated, ironically, in a situation where there's lots of people that are residential.
Mm.
And so it's better for their quality of life to be able to age where they choose to live in place. So us getting involved and being funded at a very minor level. We're considered a minimum allotment state from the federal government because we don't have more than 1 million people here in the state. So our funding hasn't been increased since the 1990s, even though we're very geriatric as a state. We're the third most geriatric state in the union. But the funds, we save, 15 to 1 ratio on the costs of the federal and state government by helping people to continue living where they choose to live. And so it's direct benefit to the client, it's direct benefit to the state. It's a good investment that helps, it's a win-win, and helps people to remain connected to the communities that they've chosen to live in. So that's kind of the relationship that we have.
Absolutely. I think that focus on helping people stay in that least restrictive environment is absolutely key. And we don't have time to get into it today, but if anyone who's been following the news, there have been some sort of concerning trends lately specific to that least restrictive environment. But
Yeah,
that's a topic for another time. I
true.
want to ask you now, Dan, as someone living with vision loss in your role in leadership, both at VAB and UMass Boston as a program coordinator, I'd love to hear a little bit from you, just about maybe we could start with one area where you feel like that lived experience is maybe giving you an edge, a leg up.
Mhm.
And then maybe we could talk about one area where it has not the vision loss itself, but the related lack of access in certain areas, how that has maybe caused some additional challenges.
Sure. Yeah. So, um, where it has been an advantage, my lived life experience as someone who's blind and visually impaired. Um, well, this will be a very strange answer, to be honest with you. But
Let's have
I
it.
I remember being in fifth grade, and my dad sat down with me one day because I was having some struggles in school. And I was upset that I had to work so hard to be able to do something that I could see some of my peers doing very quickly. And this is before a lot of the technology evolved. The big technology when I was a kid for accessing large print was simply using a copy machine and making things a whole lot bigger. And so having, 11 by 17 sheets of paper that even when fully magnified, sometimes didn't quite make, it wasn't quite large enough. And so I had a CCTV that was this giant, cathode ray tube sitting on the table. Next to it was a camera, that pointed down that I'd put things underneath it and have an XY table. And
I had one that
it
was like the size of a Volkswagen. I mean, it was
yes,
huge.
yes. Yeah, you got a hernia looking at it. It was
Right.
so heavy. Yeah. And so I remember one day getting really frustrated about it and kind of complaining about, this isn't fair that I have to, take so much longer doing all this. And my dad sat down with me and he said, look, son, yeah, this stinks. You're going to have to work twice as hard as the person next to you. You're going to have to put in twice as much time. You're going to have to put twice as much effort. He said, but when you do that, you're going to own what you did. You're going to deserve what you got as you put your effort in and as you do this, and you can do this. And he was encouraging me, and he said, this is going to stink, but it's going to pay dividends in time, is what he told me. He said, you're going to be able to look back and see that you learned how to do things now that are going to help you be successful later. And so my visual impairment has taught me to work hard, and to put in the legwork, to put in the time, to put in the mental effort, to put in the physical effort, to do what needs to be done, to be able to do what I want to do. And so I think a lot of my tenacity in life came from the necessity of having to do what I need to do every day. And so I'm actually grateful for that because I learned to work hard because of my visual impairment. I know that's a weird answer, but what that has also done is, in hindsight, because I chose to go into the field of vision rehabilitation service, which I did not want to do. I just want to be very clear. My mom became a teacher of the visually impaired, and she's like, "You ought to think about this." And I'm like, "No way! I'm not going to do what you're doing." Um, and but in
Right.
li but one day. I was with a college friend of mine that just happened to have a different kind of visual impairment than mine. I didn't really even realize he had a visual impairment until one day he explained that he couldn't read the print on a paper because of all the glare that was on it. And I said,
Mm.
the paper's too glary to you? He's like, yeah, this is just all this reflection coming off here. Just I can't see the words. And I pulled out a sheet of acetate, which my teacher of the visually impaired had given me back in third grade when I first developed my visual impairment. I put it over the top of the paper, and he acted like the sky had fallen. He's like, "What is this?" Because it cut the glare, and he's like, "This is amazing!" And he was so thrilled about it. And I realized I can help people. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was lucky. I had a teacher that visually impaired. He didn't, and I really enjoyed helping him, and it felt really good. And that kind of opened the door for me one day to say, well, maybe I do want to do something like this. And as I started getting into it, and then I started helping people, having lived it, I could show other people that they could do what I was doing, and that was very gratifying. So I fell into the vision field. I didn't want to be in the vision field, but I discovered that I loved the vision field, and that's where again I knew how to work hard, and then I also had skills I could share. But I want to be clear: what works for me may not work for them. But people knowing that I'm having to do the same stuff they're having to do, that helps them to believe they can do it too.
Absolutely, Dan. And certainly the field of vision rehabilitation is so much better off for having you
Oh,
fallen into that field. So
that's kind of you.
deeply,
Thank you.
deeply grateful for that.
Yeah.
I know we could be here most of the day, but I do want to
Sorry.
give our audience a little bit of time. So I'm going to skip us forward a couple of questions here because I'd like to, I think our audience would probably like to hear a little bit more about, you referred earlier to the SMART
Yes.
program, helping seniors learn to use technology. And so maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that. And then I would also, I guess we could kind of wrap up. I would say if you um, had a direct audience, which you may hear with designers, developers, content creators who are building and putting up digital content, um, from even
Mhm.
just your experience, maybe working with seniors in smart technology, what would you want to say to them, or what would you want them to know?
So two answers there. So you
There's two
asked about
questions.
smart, yeah. So the
Yeah, kind of ran them
first
all together.
question, no, that's okay. Um, so what we call smart training, it stands for speech magnification, access, technology, reading, and telecommunications. We like our acronyms in our field. But what that is it's us helping seniors to be able to access the accessibility features that are built into smartphones and tablets and computers, so that as they age in place, they can stay connected through telecommunications to their doctors, to their family, to their community. COVID taught all of us that telecommunications can be a great equalizer when it comes to social isolation and staying connected. But the fact of the matter is, for people who are blind and visually impaired, that same disconnect happens every day when they don't have access to that technology. And so we're trying to bridge that gap and teach the seniors that want to be connected how to connect through those accessibility features, and through universal design, which is becoming more universal in its design with technology. The possibilities are expanding rapidly. What was available 10 years ago is nothing compared to what we have now, and we know that that's only rapidly advancing moving forward. So our services help to make that connection for people. What I would say to people who are developing technology is be aware of universal design. Be aware of your software that you're designing to make sure that it is accessible to these features that are built into these products. For example, I have recently undergone a journey of health. The past 3 years, I've lost a lot of weight. I've increased my physical activity. And part of doing that was tracking my calorie intake and the nutrition I was eating. And I was using an app to be able to do that. But when I would scan things and well, the barcodes and whatnot to put into the app that I was using, what I found frequently was that the app buttons were not labeled. And so as I'm using VoiceOver on my iPhone, which should access any print on the screen, I was navigating to buttons that were saying button, 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 and nothing was happening. And sometimes when updates take place, those things get disconnected. And so right now, the on the quick access for the nutrition app that I use, when I turn VoiceOver on and I double tap on the fast action to input my breakfast, my lunch, my snack, and my dinner, um, if when I select breakfast, lunch, snack, or dinner and then double tap, nothing happens because when it updated, the developer overlooked this button and it doesn't interact with VoiceOver. So I had to send in a ticket. Now they're very fast to respond, but they're lucky I'm sending in a ticket because usually what happens is people who are blind and visually impaired, when they encounter these things, they get frustrated and they simply don't use the product. And for anyone developing products right now, with the baby boomer population being the fastest aging population, who are spending their discretionary income on software and products and things like that, you're disenfranchising a large segment of your population with vision loss that probably wants to spend their money on your products. So
Yeah,
it's
a
to
hundred
your,
percent.
yeah, it's to your
Yeah.
financial benefit to be making sure that it's 100% fully accessible. And also it's the right thing to do because you are providing a service to your customers, and your customers want to be receiving that service from you. And if you don't think about accessibility, you could be disenfranchising the population that you're trying to serve. So
That's so very well said, Dan. Our audience is very used to hearing that messaging from us, and I love to give them an opportunity to hear it from someone outside of Accessible Web, because it's true. And yeah, so thank you for that. That was very well said.